The honourable member for Cardigan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to stand in this House this evening, but I am not pleased with the subject that we have to discuss. It's of great concern to me, and it's of great concern to the people of Eastern Canada, the Gaspé and the Atlantic region. Mr. Speaker, on March the 1st, I asked the Minister of Fisheries a question concerning fleet separation and the owner-operator policy. You know, looking at the massive input that this has to our economy in Atlantic Canada. And all I wanted the Minister to do was to assure us that he would make sure that these policies remained in place, that the fishermen remained independent, and they would be able to own their own fleets. Mr. Speaker, the Minister basically said he was going to consult with fishermen, or has consulted with fishermen. Well, I have travelled for the last number of weeks, and I haven't met many fishermen that they have discussed with. The owner-operator policy was put in place by the Honourable Romeo LeBlanc, the greatest Minister of Fisheries that this House has ever seen. And he understood what owner-operator and a fleet separation policy was all about. Fleet separation just means, Mr. Speaker, that you cannot own the fleet and process the product. It means that you do not own everything. It means you do not have control of everything in the sea and everything on the land. And owner-operator means simply, Mr. Speaker, that you own the boat and you go out and fish. That's the basic livelihood. That's what keeps our small communities in Atlantic Canada and the Gaspé in Quebec alive. Now, if we're to lose this, it would be quite devastating. I, in the last number of weeks, as I said, have travelled across Atlantic Canada, and my good friend, the member from Papineau, who happens to be the son of one of the greatest prime ministers in this country, who served with the Honourable, who was the Prime Minister with the Honourable Romeo LeBlanc, met with a number of fisheries groups, and he met with the Fisheries Policy Dialogue in Chelsea, Quebec. They have the same concerns, Mr. Speaker, as all the fishermen that I have met across Atlantic Canada. Their concern is that they have something that's quite valuable, going to be more valuable, and the government could give it to the corporate sector. Take it from the fishermen, take it from the communities, and give it to the corporate sector. He also met with the Professional Fisheries Alliance in Quebec. They also were very concerned. Now, Mr. Speaker, time goes very quick, but the Minister also spoke about young people not being involved in the fishery. In Newfoundland, I met with in a number of different places in Newfoundland, and I was people in the room that were young men, young women. Sure, there was some whiteheads. Same in Halifax, Nova Scotia, I met a lot of fisheries groups. And last Sunday I attended the MFU's annual meeting. There was some talk that the MFU supported dealing with this policy, looking at this policy. They made it quite clear, Mr. Speaker, that they fully opposed discussing the owner-operator fleet separation policy. It is not on the table for them to discuss. Other things are. They do not feel, Mr. Speaker, that they have something that the government should take from them and give to the corporate sector. I only hope that the Parliamentary Secretary, who I have respect for, will confirm that these policies will remain in place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, we've heard a lot of opinions with respect to DFO's policies in recent days, some from my honourable friend from Cardigan. Now, I'm not here to say whether I disagree or agree with these policies, but I am here to say we need to be able to have a discussion about these things. And I'm not alone in this position. In the words of the respected host of the fisheries broadcast in Newfoundland, John Furlong, and I quote, "It's time to have a discussion without fear of recrimination," unquote. Now, we have heard a broad spectrum of views, and many people have expressed the importance of understanding the origins of these policies. And my colleague has mentioned this as well, but allow me to provide a little bit more background on both the owner-operator and fleet separation policies to which he's referred. The fleet separation policy was introduced in the Atlantic inshore fishery in the 1970s. Basically, it states that corporations and processing companies may not be issued new fishing licenses. So originally the purpose was to separate the harvesting sector from the processing sector to help prevent any one group from controlling the supply chain. The owner-operator policy was introduced in the 1980s to address an imbalance that emerged from the fleet separation policy. This policy requires license holders to be on board the vessel to personally fish the license. It was designed to support the individually operated inshore fleet. Now, these policies have evolved over time in response to specific requests. Many rules have been adapted over time to allow for exemptions. This has led to regional variances that complicate the administrative process and may create unfair advantages. And so across the country you can find these policies displayed in many different ways. In British Columbia, for example, neither of these policies are in place. But for example, in Newfoundland and Labrador, a fisherman can get a 120-day exemption from the owner-operator policy, allowing someone else to operate his vessel. Perhaps he's sick during that period. In the Maritimes region, the exemption only permits 30 days. As another example, in some cases, processors were providing capital to harvesters in order to secure a supply of fish. In some cases, trust agreements did indeed put the control and decisions in the hands of the processors. As a result of all of these changes, another policy was introduced in 2007 to preserve the independence of inshore harvesters and strengthen the owner-operator and fleet separation policies. And last year, the fleet separation policy was further amended to allow wholly owned corporations to hold fishing licenses. So these have developed and evolved over the years. So typically, with every rule and policy that has been adopted over time, exemptions or exemptions have to be adopted to provide the flexibility that harvesters need to manage their business. So to be clear, Mr. Speaker, our review is not fully or focused solely on the owner-operator and fleet separation policies, though we recognize their importance to many harvesters in the Atlantic. These policies and others are complex, and they need to be considered in today's context to see if they remain effective in the face of fluctuating resources and changing market conditions. The purpose of our current work is not to arbitrarily remove or support policies, but to see where there are unnecessary complexities and inefficiencies that exist and identify barriers for improved economic prosperity for fishers. I hope you would agree with that goal. It's for these reasons that we went out to speak with Canadians with an open mind to hear their views on what works and what doesn't. And now we're going to consider the feedback we received through in-depth and objective analysis, and this will allow us to better understand the issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cardigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very disappointed with what the Parliamentary Secretary had to say. Consulting, I would think, means talking to people. It means talking to people in the industry. Mr. Speaker, I've travelled all through Atlantic Canada. My colleague from Papineau travelled through the Gaspé in Quebec. None of them have talked to anybody in government. But it's funny, the corporate sector knows all about this. The corporate sector knows very well, Mr. Speaker, that the inshore fisherman in eastern Canada has something valuable, and the corporate sector wants it. And I'm fearful that this government is going to give it to them. Why, Mr. Speaker, would you destroy the economy? I've worked for 23 years, with a privilege to work for 23 years in the riding of Cardigan to help provide economic development. Why in one swoop would you destroy the economic development of the whole east coast of Canada? Why?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, my question to my honourable colleague is why he would be opposed to us going and talking to fishermen and asking what the barriers that they see in order to allow them to earn a living. Now, he's from the sort of the wealthy part of PEI, I suppose, where there's lobster fishermen that make a good living. But if he traveled all through the Atlantic provinces, like he says, then he must have come across these fishermen in Newfoundland and Labrador and other parts of the Maritimes who have difficulty making a living. And, you know, they do the best they can. They've got these policies, they not just these two, but but others that might be barriers in allowing them to earn a living. We need to listen to them and take their advice. And we talked to them, and they had every opportunity to respond both by email and by letter and attend these meetings. And now we're looking at the information that they provided, see if there's a way to provide the prosperity that they're looking for.
And the motion to adjourn the House is now deemed to have been adopted. Accordingly, this House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 2 p.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24-1.